everybody. A big sky howdy, and welcome to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio. We're coming to you with episode number 17 here, and I have a special guest that I've been wanting to have on for a while, and we chat a lot. And he is also interested in cryptid research and has been sort of involved peripherally in it most of his life, and what he does directly is sort of related to it anyway. He has a real interesting take on things from the perspective of his vocation and also his hobby of being interested in this and doing it part-time in research. And so I'd like to welcome and bring Dave M. on. Thanks, Dave, for being with us.
Hi, how are you? Good to be here.
Doing great, buddy. Glad to talk to you by phone. Usually it's the middle of the night and we're chatting back and forth on Facebook. While we're busy doing other things, posting stuff all over the place. Yep. So it's like kind of fun to actually get a chance to actually talk to you for a change here. But I wanted to start everybody out with your background as far as the whole Bigfoot subject is. How did you get interested in that initially? Did you have an encounter first, or did you hear about it first? How did that all work in your life?
Well, I saw pictures in Argosy magazine and a couple others at the barbershop when I was a kid. I was born in '58, and so I'm a little older than you are. I would see those pictures, and we'd see snippets of it on TV. Of course, I didn't have the remote control. Well, actually, back then we didn't even have a remote control. I was the remote control.
Yeah.
You know, he'd say, Dave, go over there and change the channel. Okay.
And
so,
if you had another sibling, they were the one that was holding the rabbit ears to make sure it was at the right angle so you could get a good picture.
We were in the country, so we had a big antenna. But I was the remote control. That's why.
Yeah,
it finally got to the point where they were less concerned with it affecting my reproductive organs sitting too close to the TV, and more concerned with not having to get up and change the channel. So they finally let me sit close to the TV. So, but I unfortunately, unless it was Sunday afternoon and they were taking naps, or Saturday morning, I didn't get to choose what we were going to watch very often. But that was okay. I liked John Wayne and Bonanza too. So, you know.
Which is pretty much 90% of what was on back then.
My grandpa called them "shoot 'em in the guts."
Yeah.
So as time went by, I would hear more and more about this, and guys would, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is at barbershop, and there was our barber was a gentleman that had lost his leg in World War II, and his two sons, and they had the barber shop across from the car dealership. My dad drove Cadillacs, and so I would, when I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I got tired of sitting over there while he was getting his car serviced, I'd go hang out at the barber shop. And occasionally I'd shine shoes or whatever, and not to earn money necessarily, but just something to do. And we had a lot of conversations in the barber shop. Everything from war stories to what is Bigfoot to what's going to happen after Kennedy. So
yeah,
a lot of interesting conversations. As time went by, I ended up in the real estate business with my dad. My dad had been a real estate broker for total. He spent 35 years doing it in 3 states. Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas, and we sold farms and ranches. And so I grew up going to farm auctions, and we hunted. My dad grew up in Gunnison, Colorado, on a homestead. They actually were Mustangers and caught wild horses and sold them to the CCC boys that were building all of the high mountain roads and lakes. Finishing off. That's why those lakes look so perfect with the shorelines and everything. Is because somebody built them. And retention reservoirs up in the high mountains. And this was in central Colorado, west central Colorado. And so, prior to that, they had been road builders, and actually they put the finish on, I'll start even earlier than that. My dad was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and when he was 2 years old, they had just finished building all the railroad beds in western Nebraska with 200 teams of horses. That's 4 horses each on each team. That's 800 head, and they got the job to put the finish on the road going over Monarch Pass. And so they drove 800 head of stock plus their saddle horses plus mules and with 32 covered wagons to load up all of the equipment, and went to Gunnison, Salida, Colorado, and then the family went on over to Gunnison, and they spent 2 years doing that job, and then by it's 31, 32, 30, by 33, 34, they sold all their stuff to the CC boys and went into the Mustang business, and so. That, catching
Cowboys, they were born in the wrong age, man.
Yeah.
They should have been about 50 years earlier.
Well, the funny part was my great-grandfather was the He-Man. He was 5'6", and he was a tough bird. And my grandpa, he'd had polio, so he was pretty gimpy, but he had rejuvenated himself. He put one hand in his overalls, and another in his what we call a knee pad on his bad leg, and rejuvenated himself by breaking 2 full sections to the plow behind 4 horses. Put a single rein off each, coming off the back, gather on each one of them, and I guess he walked with a limp all his life, but he got to where he could handle things. So he's one of my heroes. You don't meet very many guys that get polio and get totally paralyzed on one side and end up functioning after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at any rate, they homesteaded up in Saguache County, and 16 miles behind the W Mountain there in southeast of Gunnison, Colorado. And I grew up spending half of my summers in Gunnison and part of other times of the year. And so I grew up in Oklahoma, but I also grew up in Gunnison, Colorado, and I had a lot of cousins there that were hardcore cowboys. And so I kind of grew up looking at the back end of somebody else's horse going up and down the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, by the time that I was old enough to carry a gun and hunt, I kind of knew my way around. And I'd won my spurs by then. So, that kind of gave me that kind of background. In '84, we bought a ranch and partnered in a ranch in Colorado, and we were going to sell it out with undivided interest, make it kind of a resort deal. And we got my cousin to do that, and he got in a Jeep wreck right off the bat, so he was the hardcore cowboy, so I had to come up and take over. And so for a couple of years I did that, and took hunters out the first year, and kind of knew my way around. I knew that area. This was in Rio Grande County. And actually, the Stearmans own that place now. They bought it. We walked out after the oil bust in '85, late '85. And so we were up there about 2 years, I guess. It was early '83 anyway. It's now a fly-in bush pilot resort. Isn't that funny? And they so all the bush pilots from all over Colorado, they land there and spend the weekend. And they have BS sessions out front, and I didn't lose anything there to go back for. It's too high, too cold. But I took out hunters the first year. This is working up to my first experience seeing them. I really had forgotten completely about them, hadn't thought about them, and my idea of wildlife was grizzlies, and there weren't any in Colorado, and I really didn't take anything else serious. I knew there were mountain lions around. Yeah. I didn't really realize how many until Jerry Cooney, the guy that used to be on American Sportsman, pulled up with a truck and all his dogs and wanted a lion hunt out back. And I thought, holy moly, we got lions? He said, oh, you got them all over the place. And I'm going, I guess I'm going to hunt back there anymore. I quit the rock climbing in the area right then, and but by the second season, that first year, I didn't have any hunters booked, and I was going to try to hunt an area. I had already been up scouting, and there were guys everywhere in our backcountry. They were coming from the other side, evidently. I don't know, but I knew that come hunting season, especially by the second season, that if the weather was warm, we were going to be just inundated with hunters, and I didn't have any hunters the second season. I wanted to get an elk myself.
Right.
And I'd been anxious. My cousin had talked about the Waimanooch and that area over Canejos County and those areas. He had run cattle operations over there as a general manager of different companies, and talked about that country. And I knew a lot of it was high and bald with, scattering of trees, and then other parts of it were straight up and down, and I really had an itch to get over there and spend some time. So me and another guy that showed up at the ranch, and he's kind of became my saddle buddy, but I didn't know him that well, but I took him with me. And he took his gun because he didn't have any other optics, and I had my binoculars, and we were going to go over there, and I, of course, had my pistol, and we were going to go over there and scout for elk. I kind of took him along because it's nice to have somebody along,
Yeah.
And so we got up into the western part of Canejos County. This is from trying to think of the name, South Fork. From South Fork, the old mountain man town, from South Fork, that, of course, if you keep going west, you'll end up at Wolf Creek Pass, but from South Fork's the first town east of Wolf Creek, and from there you go south, and you're in Canejos County.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an area that we ended up in that's about straight southeast of Wolf Creek. And we got over there and parked my Jeep, and we parked and decided to walk a ways. And we'd walked about an hour and a half and came up into a little kind of a bowl, looked like a little amphitheater, but it was facing us. And so it looked like, well, this might be a good deal. I knew the wind was in our face, and I thought I'd climb up on top of there. It was about, I don't know, between 15, 20 feet in the air on those boulders. I'd climb up there and be kind of inconspicuous. Won't be, there's other boulders that were higher and a little depression up there, and I'd crawl up there and glass a little while. We wanted to rest. Of course, all he wanted to do was, I don't know, scratch his head and sit around and complain. And so he sat over there and, he's bitching about having to carry that rifle. I didn't tell him to, but he did. Anyway, so I climbed up there, and I'm glassing, and after about 10 minutes, I got the surprise of my life. Literally, and I'm going to use terms that I did not know then, that I've learned from hanging out with Duke and listening to Wes Germer's show and listening to the Outlaws and Coonbo and Bear. So I've kind of adapted that vocabulary, but believe me, when I first saw this stuff, I didn't know what to call it. I guess now you'd call it a troop. All I knew is there's a whole bunch of critters, and they came walking out looking like men, and they were all standing straight up and down. I counted at least 8 adults.
Wow.
There was 4 to 6, I think maybe 5 or 6 at most, I think, of the ones that were about 5 foot tall, 4 to 5 foot tall. The rest of them were all 8 foot tall. I can't say there was 8. There might have been more. They were kind of going in and out of the trees. And 2 of them, though, were 10 foot or a little bigger. They were huge. They're monsters. And I'd say they were between 3.5 and 4 foot wide. All of these were black. And I'm telling you, I sat there with my mouth open, and the whole time I'm up there, I'm thinking, wind don't shift, wind don't shift, wind don't shift. Because it's right in my face, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, crap, how do we get out of here? How far is it to the Jeep? Holy moly. And then it dawns on me, I'm stuck. Because they've looked my way 2 or 3 times, as well as other directions. And I realized that if I moved, I'm screwed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of setting the stage for what's about to happen. That's why I didn't beat a fast one out of there, because I'm stuck. And, I'm 100 yards from these things. And, can I tell you what their faces look like? Well, I had a pretty good set of Nikon binoculars, but they were Nikon binoculars. I didn't have Swarovskis or, what's the other one? Anyway, the fancy Swiss stuff. I had a set of Nikons, and I could kind of see their faces, but they were in the shade of the pine trees, and these were lodgepole pine. This is a big flat area, and it's got peaks to the south, peaks to the north, peaks to the south were way back behind us, and it's kind of a rolling bald area that had a tree about every 10 feet, every 5 or 6 feet. In other places there'd be clumps of them. They were all lodgepole pine, and they were all anywhere from a foot to 18 inches in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an area where you could see a ways. it was. I think the reason that it wasn't real thick with trees is because it was rocky, you know.
Yeah.
And you're basically up on top of just a big bald area, and so, you know, perfect for glassing for elk, perfect for looking at boogers. But you know, my God, how do I get out of here? Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
so
you're
I'm
way too close, you know. And at the size,
man.
you've got a couple of them that are 10 feet tall, man. They can get to where you're at real fast.
You know, I didn't know they could run like that till later. I didn't know any of those things. All I knew was it's kind of like Ron White. You know, I didn't know how many of them it was going to take to whip me, but I knew that they were going to whip me. You know, and
yeah.
I had no concept of them eating me. You know what I'm saying?
Thank
but
goodness.
If I'd had my rifle, I'd have felt better. I had what I call my Dury Harriet. I had the same gun that Clint Eastwood used in the movies. Only my hands are smaller, so I had Pac-Man grips on. Pac-Mar grips on it. Pac-Mar grips on it. and you know, I had that on my belt, but I'm not a good shot. You know, especially not 100 yards. And you know, I had 18 bullets on me. You know.
Oh man.
So you know, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, no. So I finally, I started really looking and seeing what they were doing. There was one of them that was really calling the shots, and he kind of gestured, and the what I'm taking to be females. All these things look like Patty, every one of them. Now, do they look just like Patty? No, but they all had that build.
That big barrel-shaped body.
Yeah, no waist, and they all had the elevated heads. What do you call those?
Sagittal crest.
Yeah, they all had those. Yeah, these were monsters, and the reason I know how tall they were is because I could pretty much get an idea from the rocks around that we'd walk through stuff that looked like that, how what the size of the small ones were. And they were about the small ones, the taller of the small ones, about the same height the guy was with, you know. And so I just kind of added from there. You know, I'm at that point I was getting a little shook up. This guy was with me. He was getting really shook up. I think he said the same cuss word 3 dozen times in a row. Oh shit! 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 You know, and then he change it and do the same, another cuss word, and then he'd do the same thing over again. And you know, and he's at a place where he can kind of lay his rifle over. And I told him if he shot, I'd shoot him, and he believed me. And I said, if you shoot, I'll kill you. And but he was looking through his glass, and he was really freaking out. And I was between trying to shush him and sit still, and I had my hands full there for a little while, and he was really freaking out. So we're watching these things, and it suddenly dawns on me they're going to hunt. And, you know, because we'd driven game before, not in the Rockies for deer or elk, but, you know, I grew up pheasant hunting, and, you know, you put a bunch of guys in a row, and then you go to the other end of the field and drive them back at them. You know, I was smart enough in woodsmanship and, you know, in hunting to figure out these things were getting set up, and he was gesturing and then circling his arms and making kind of gestures. The big one of the big ones, and these things, the other ones, they took off. Now the ones that took off, I counted about 5 of them. So that's why I'm saying there may have been more than 8, but about 5 of them took off. Now, they kind of split up into 2 groups, and they took off back to the east. I'm thinking, you know, that time of year, the rut wasn't going on yet with the, well, it probably was for up to that high for the elk, but you didn't hear any bugling. And but sure enough was the for the deer, and the bucks would gather a couple of does together, and they would lay up under the breaks of whatever, you know, a hill or you know, in the edge of a draw or wherever you'd see them. Anywhere you'd see something that would skylight, there's a tree, you kind of look below it and you'd glass and you'd see a buck and a couple of does. And it was that time of year. And so I'm thinking that they were going to come from the east and try to, spook them back that way. It looked like they were getting them into a funnel point. I can't think of what you call that. Anyway, they were going to move them toward a. I'm having a senior moment here. What do you call that? They were going to drive them into these other ones, basically. And the way the rocks were set up over there, it looked like that'd probably work. Well, when they disappeared and these others got busy, now about 20 to 30 minutes has gone by, probably 25, 30 minutes, and I'm able finally to slip away, get back down off of there because they're out of my field of vision. So I figured I was out of there. So I slipped off of there, and by then the wind was not as strong and act like it was shifting a little bit. And we needed to open a fast can of, adios.
Mm-hmm.
We got out of there.
Yeah, and if the wind's going to switch and start heading back in their direction, you really need to get out of there.
It was about to start blowing west, but who knows up that high.
Yeah.
And so, it was about to start. It was coming out of the north, and it was about to start coming out of the east. Mm-hmm. And so, who knows up that high. So anyway, we got out of there. I'd had him watching our back because we do that all the time up there anyway, because there's so many illegals in those counties, which I'm none of my business, Mm-hmm. Back then, it's a whole lot different than now. They weren't folks that were coming in trying to kill you. These were just friendly Mexicans. So, mm-hmm. But they're, if they thought you were the game ranger, you'd be in big trouble. They'd try to kill you. So, we always watched our back. And I always did, because I got mistaken for the game ranger once, and they nearly shot me. Oh. And I knew just enough Spanish to get out of there, and they were going to shoot me. So
you managed to get safely away from this big troop that you guys saw up there. Then is that pretty much it? Mm-hmm. Did you have any more conversation with your buddy up there about what you just saw or anything on the way out there?
Yeah, but none of his was coherent.
So you got a guy really, really bad.
Yeah. When you got a guy that I felt sorry. He had been hanging out in an old abandoned cabin up there, and I felt sorry for him, so I let him stay at the ranch and do some jobs for me. He had an old beat-up pickup truck that could pull a trailer, and we needed to move a tractor around occasionally, and so I didn't know this guy that well, and he was pretty much coming unglued. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks after that, he took off with half of my knife collection and a pair of my boots, and I never saw him again. So it tells you, I didn't really have a relationship with the guy. And so,
well, at that point, he may have just decided to not live in the mountains anymore and come to somewhere.
Might have. So at any rate, it took us over an hour and a half to get back to the truck, and we would stop every once in a while and watch our back, and we were zigzagging a bit just because of the terrain, and so I was kind of freaked out because I was having trouble finding my Jeep, but we did, and we got out of there, and then as it turns out, I didn't get to go back there and hunt because 2 weeks after that, they got 10 foot of snow up there. And all of the like overnight, all of the they literally on the 31st. This was in October. On the 31st, late October, on the 31st, they opened Wolf Creek for free skiing. They were so shocked that all the snow had come in, and all the guides that had the guides and outfitters up there, they had to helicopter them all out. They had to shoot their horses and abandon their camps. It was the big deal in February. All the locals were going up there to raid these camps because they knew by springtime they were going to be wiped. As the snow thawed, they'd end up in the bottom of a canyon somewhere. So, I didn't go because of what I'd seen up there, and I didn't want to. But a lot of people I knew, and I called a couple of them. You don't want to go up there, and all they didn't pay attention. So, So at any rate, that was my first encounter. They were all black. They all looked like that Patty deal from the Patterson film.
Right.
In shape. I didn't see any breasts, but they were the sun was this was about 2:30, and the sun was out of the a little bit out of the west, just far enough to where they were in the shadows the whole time from those pines. So, you know, I never did see any breasts. Tell you the truth, I never even thought to look. But
well, what do you think at this point? I mean, you know, you had already, of course, with the local social gathering place of the barber shop back in the olden days, and looking at, you know, pictures of Patterson, Gimlin, photos and stuff. And then you actually see these things, and not just like one, but a whole bunch of them.
Well, what I left out was my grandpa had told me my grandpa and I were pretty close, as my mom's dad. And he had grown up, his dad and mom got married, and she was 10 years older than him. She was good looking, a school teacher, and my great-grandfather, that's my grandfather's mother, her dad owned the first ranch in Indian Territory they were Choctaws. And he was half white, half Choctaw. She was or Anglo in Choctaw, and she was 3/4 Anglo, and my grandmother, and she's pretty good looking. And she's 28. She's an old maid because there wasn't a lot of eligible guys over in Choctaw land at the time that wanted to fool around with a white girl, and we were just Choctaw enough to be there, but not Choctaw enough to fit in, and too much. My great-grandfather was, but at any rate, she married him at 18. He was a Pruitt, and they had my grandfather, and 2 years later, he took off to go buckaroo. So she kind of got stuck, you know, there with a boy. And a couple of his cousins were there, and she kind of took them in, too, and took care of them. And that's where my grandfather grew up, was on that ranch over, and this is in Kiamichi Wilderness area, southeast Oklahoma, south of Broken Bow, so over by the Hanobi area. And so my grandfather had told me about boogers, but he never really said what they were. You know, he said they're so I'd heard boogers a bunch, and he never equated it to patty.
Right.
And I don't know that he ever saw that. He didn't go to the same barbershop. So, you know, my grandfather worked at the refinery, and he worked nights, and, you know, at any rate, we spent a lot of time together different times, and he would tell me about this stuff and growing up and how they had to be careful of buggers, and, you know, and did you go running around the woods a lot? No, there were buggers, and we had to be careful of buggers, and I wasn't old enough to carry a gun yet, so I had to be careful of buggers, and I'd hear this stuff, but I didn't really know what a booger was. Okay, right. I didn't know. For all I knew, it was an armadillo, great big armadillo. I didn't know, but I figured it out pretty quick when I saw those things. Before I got off those rocks, I figured out those were boogers that he was talking about. Because if there was anything that grabbed you in the woods, it was these rascals.
Yeah.
And so I made the connection pretty quick while I was up on the rocks. Now I'm gonna skip over to my next encounter, which I did not see them, but it was the scariest. I never got hit with any infrasound when I was in Colorado up on those rocks. I never got hit with anything. I saw them; they didn't know I was there. Thank God, I got out. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So now we go to. I'm fishing. By the way, I had a conversion experience when my dad passed away in 1990. So now we're skipping forward to 1990. And I had grown up fishing a pond out in the Gloss Mountains, which is northwest Oklahoma. And they're basically a bunch of low mesas with shale and red rock, red dirt and shale. And we had a pond out there. It's about a 45-minute drive from my house. And I would go over there and go fishing. We had a pond, and we knew the owners, and you know, there wasn't any problem. And I had fished that thing probably. I grew up fishing it with my dad. I grew up, you know, then later on with high school, and then guys that I knew in college. We'd all go out there and be crazy, and then, you know, later on, and by the time the 90s rolled around, this was my old hangout. I hadn't been out there in several years, so I went out there, and I decided that I would go at night. I got bored, and I had gone through some emotional trauma with a breakup, and I just decided I needed to go night fishing. And I needed something to do. That was my big idea. So by 11:30 or so, it's a full moon, and I'm in my waders they had the built-in boots in an inner tube. They have a canvas cover and a seat built in. They zip on an inner tube, and they got a seat built in. And you kind of waddle out there, step into it, waddle out there, get in the water, and kick off. Mm-hmm. Now you're supposed to wear flippers. We didn't wear flippers. We just kind of floated around and you kick. If you want to go anywhere, you had to go backwards, right? Because your propellers are your feet and they're out in front. And so anyway, I'm out there and I'm fishing for a couple hours. I'm fishing topwater and I'm making a lot of noise. I'm trying to make a lot of noise. I got topwater lures going, mm-hmm. And I'm trying to get the bass to come up there, see them, and come up and eat them. And I'd caught a few, and nothing big enough to keep. And I hear it comes about 2 o'clock, and I'm thinking, I'll do it another hour, maybe hour and a half, and I'll go. And so I'm kind of moving toward the center of the pond from the far side, and I was going to fish my way back over there, and then maybe fish off the bank once I put my gear away. And I was parked up on the dam, and I hear what I think is a cougar scream. Now out there, you do think about cougar. And although mostly bobcats, but I heard this thing, and sounded like it was a couple hundred yards off. It wasn't real loud, but it was. I mean, it was loud from where it was at, but it was a couple hundred, maybe 150 yards off, 100 yards off. And I'm thinking, well, something got something, cat fight somewhere. And so I didn't pay much attention to it because I'd never seen anything from this pond other than a rattlesnake or two. Right. And we're at a high spot, and especially with that being up there on that dam, you can see for a long ways. And so then I hear some footsteps. And then I got hit with what I know now to be some kind of an infrasound kind of a deal. Because all of a sudden, I got fear that hit me like crazy. Well, by this time, I was already seasoned in deliverance by a year or so, and I knew that the first thing you did with that, I thought, oh boy, here comes the devil. And so I started coming against that, binding it, rebuking it from coming against me in the name of Jesus, whose blood atones for my sins. I bind you and rebuke you. I was coming against it. I'm going to run that thing off out of there. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it gets worse. Well, that never happened to me. I mean, I'd seen some spooky stuff, man.
Man, oh man, yeah, that's before. You're used to dealing with spooky stuff, and what you're used to doing all of a sudden isn't working. That would be really scary.
Yeah, and so it's getting worse, and so I get louder. In my final attempt to, run this thing off, and I wasn't going to be my final attempt. I was going to do it till it went. I don't have quit's not a part of my vocabulary when it comes to this kind of stuff. And so, I'm going to hit it 3 ways, fast, hard, and continuous, and I'm going to do that until it's gone. Right. And it didn't go. And then the only thing that broke what I was doing was the mesquite tree started shaking. And I don't mean a part of a mesquite tree. I'm saying the whole cotton picking mesquite tree started shaking, and then one of them started shaking right beside the pond.
Oh, man.
Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you could hook a chain to a mesquite tree, put it behind your pickup truck, and you'd have to yank it doing 20 miles an hour to shake a whole mesquite tree.
Yeah. Those are really solid trees. They do not flex and bend.
Well, they come out, the base of them, and then they all come out like a separate tree from the base. Mm-hmm. And so you may shake one part of it, but you ain't going to shake the whole thing. These whole things were being shaken. And there were like 3 of them. And when that one by the pond started shaking, I thought, holy crap. And to tell you the truth, at that point, I quit thinking about what I was feeling and started thinking, are these illegals? What's going on here? and I disassociated what I'd been feeling from what I was seeing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I blew off what I was feeling and started saying, what am I seeing here? And so then it suddenly dawned on me the two were connected. And when that happened, I'm thinking, I start talking out loud, and I say, I'm leaving now. I'm going. You can cool your jets. I'm getting out of here. It's yours. You can have the pond. And I start getting out of there, and it suddenly dawns on me, as soon as I'm about a third of the way to the dam, Bigfoot. Boogers.
Yeah.
It finally hit me. Took me a while with all that to process what in the world this was. And the the Cimarron River is about 2 miles back to the north from us. And I'm thinking, shoot, something's come from the river. And now, because I'm thinking, because I'm having a flashback to those great big ones I saw, because I'm trying to think what in the world could shake a whole mesquite tree by grabbing its base and shaking it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's got to be gigantic, super strong.
That or it's got a bulldozer behind it. You know, it's something's going on here.
Yeah.
And when that finally, then when I came to that conclusion, all of a sudden, now it's hitting me stronger, and I'm going, it's okay, I'm leaving now, you know, and I mean the fear of God's in me, and did I ever see anything? No, never saw anything, but I knew from what I was feeling. When I got to the edge of the pond, my gosh, it took like, it seemed like eternity for me kicking backwards, and I had a .38, but I had the first two bullets were cartridges were rat shot. And you know, and I've got little tiny, what were they, 110 grain bullets or something like that.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, it's my take them to the. It's my actually what it is. It's my shoot a catfish pistol.
Right.
In these bass ponds, you catch a catfish, and when the big ones, you shoot him in the head and just drop him back in the water, because they eat the bass, you know. And so, mud cats, yellow cats, that kind of stuff. I don't even want to touch them. You just shoot them and drop them back in the water. That's why I carried it for.
You know, when you shoot them, you should have chucked them up on shore so the Bigfoot could eat them.
Well, that's what they were there for. That's what they were there for. Yeah. So I was in their feeding spot, I would imagine. That, or they were going to get set up and do an ambush of stuff coming to drink early in the morning. That's what I kind of figured after I got out of there. At any rate, I got to the edge. I'm now standing with this thing, you know, in my knees. I can't get out of it. So now I'm doing this. I'm trying not to lose my fishing rod and my tackle, and I'm trying to get up in the deal. And my rods cost a lot of money. I'd take a butt whooping before I lose those rods. Right. And I'm trying to get the tube and all that. And I'm telling you, that final deal, I missed my britches right there in my. I'm telling you, they hit my bowels and whoom. And you know, I said, well, so much for taking on. The good thing I'm wearing waders. So I just threw the thing all my gear in the back of my little blazer, and I jumped in wearing my waders, and forget the change out, and
you can get out there when you're safe.
Fished around there for my keys, and I took off out of there, and I by that time I was so convinced that I was going to die that you know, the flashbacks from Colorado. I ran, you know, I took out part of 2 mesquite trees and just knocked the way out of my blazer. But you know, I think one time I was even come up on 2 wheels, going, you know, making a curve and hitting that thing, and you know, making a sharp turn trying to get out of there. I didn't back up. If I'd hit something, I just kept going. You know what I'm saying? And,
that's blind panic, buddy. When you get in that mode, you don't care. It's just I'm getting out of here or I'm dying trying. One or the other.
Yeah. And so when I finally got to that cattle guard and got onto that dirt road, and there's a half mile or 3/4 of a mile up to the road, you know, I'm going real fast. And you know, I got to that road, and you know, I got 6 miles down the road before I, you know, could breathe. And believe me, I'm never going back.
Now, you were there. It was dark when you were there fishing?
Oh yeah, I went out there at 11:30 at night on a full moon. I'd fish all night, lots of times, because that's good bass fishing, you know.
Right. Now, in that particular place, had you done any night fishing in that particular spot?
Sure, man, I'd done all kinds of stuff, but it had been, you know, 8 years to a decade before.
Okay.
You know, by this time I'm 1990. I'm 28 years old. You know, we'd gone when I was in college and stuff. Maybe not a decade. Maybe
Well,
maybe
so
6,
what,
8 years before.
was there like a
know.
long gap in between the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
time you were there?
I'd been out there in probably 6 years.
Okay.
Or more.
So they might have just been sort of taking over this area, and they're not used to seeing you there. You hadn't been there in 6 years, and
Right.
they're going, "Who the hell's this guy? Get
Yeah,
out of here!"
for all I know, it might have changed owners and nobody been in there. It didn't have any cattle on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It could have been just deserted at that point too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Somebody could have died and the heirs had it. You know, there's no telling. At any rate, it still had a cattle guard, still had fences up, but it wasn't marked. I mean, it wasn't posted. And I'd always fished there, so I wasn't going to do any harm. I was catch and release unless I caught a big one. You know,
Right.
something good enough that I got my mouth started to water, and you know, that's kind of what I figured. And so I was just trying to spend it. I had a broken heart, and I was 28 years old, and I just decided I will stay out of trouble. What kind of trouble can I get in going fishing? You know.
Well, you answered that question.
Yeah, big trouble. And so, at any rate, so that was my second experience. My third experience came. Well, let me back up. Before my third experience, then I had some other encounters, but I don't know what they were. We were appraising farms for flood damage. And I got run out of 2 or 3 places. We had big floods in 86, 87, 88. And even before this, before this encounter out there, I'd seen some tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know. And then after this time period, I continued to work in Oklahoma. We did over 5,000 appraisals in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And so there's very little. I've been up to my chin whiskers in mud a whole bunch of times, but figuratively, not really. But I mean, I knew I'm supposed to be a topsoil expert, and so I know more than the average Joe. And
mostly doing that many
hydraulics.
appraisals and
and I go
looking
in
over the property lines and everything. Yeah, you've got to crop all over that property. Yeah.
I go in after floods, and the places where I would go would be next to the water.
Yeah.
And I go in a year or so after.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen a lot of tracks. I've seen, and from 92 on, I saw a lot of tracks. In 93, they had a flood in Missouri. In 94, flood continued. So it was the flood of 93, 94, all through the winter of 93, 94. Waters finally subsided in the spring of 94. The Missouri River, they had a high-pressure dome over central Missouri. And it just stayed there and rained and rained and rained and rained. The water was the Missouri River was anywhere from 30 to 60 miles wide.
Oh, Lord.
And the majority of it was 90 foot deep. Wow. And so, we're talking about Noah's Ark kind of flood. You know what I'm saying? Whole cemeteries that would be, adjacent to, riparian areas would disappear. I mean, water, like creeks or rivers and stuff. The whole cemeteries would disappear. So, I mean, they were even finding cadavers from Civil War era stuff floating down the river, stiff, partially decomposed, with their head still on a pillow. I mean, this was bizarre stuff. We saw, when I got up there and started working, I saw pregnant dead cattle up in the top, 30 feet up in the top of trees, dead.
Mm.
And just berm breaks and farms that literally the berm break and would cut and the whole farm would cut a hole, 80 foot deep. As this water spinning, the power of that water is just, and then cut a new riverway over the horizon through these farms. It boggles the mind, and all those towns through there, the whole towns had been underwater. Mm-hmm. and through some of those areas. And so anyway, I was doing some appraisals up there in 94 late '94, or like October '94, September, October. I was starting to cool off a little bit, and it must have been October. And I had come over a berm, and the farm had been washed out just the other side of the berm. So there's supposed to be a farm there of 80 acres, and then some brush, and then the river. Well, now it's you go over the berm, it's 60 feet of dirt and then a river. Because we're talking about the Missouri River.
Right.
And so I'm assessing that farm, and I come over there, and there's not a whole lot to write off to write down because it's all gone. I'm just taking pictures. And so I come over and then I walk to the south. I come in on the north end of the property. I walk to the south, and I came back across the berm way south of where I went in. Okay? And we're talking about 80. We're talking about a quarter mile south.
Okay.
And if you look at a checkerboard of a section, then a quarter section is like one of the quarters, and then 80 acres would be half of one of those. So I guess it's more like a half mile. Yeah, it's a half mile. Excuse me, half mile. I knew it was a way. I came out a half mile south. When I did, I on the non-river side of the berm side I'm coming back to, it's got brushy trees, and it's been summer, and so everything's green. I come over that, and as I do, I get hit with that same thing from the pond in Oklahoma, only not as bad. And so now I'm slow walking, and I'm looking around the edge of that bush, there's a bushy tree little deal, and boom, there's two buggers. And
how far away from you were they?
Well, I told this story before, and I said 50 yards, but I got to thinking that they were closer than that. It was more like 75 feet.
Right.
Yeah, 70 feet, something like that. Maybe half that distance.
25 yards, maybe.
Yeah. So they're I was thinking yards came out of my mouth, and I meant to say feet. You know what I'm saying? And then when he repeated,
at any rate, they're too damn close.
Yeah. Anyway, and so one of them is now these aren't black. One of them's black, one of them's brown, but it's a black. He's not. He's more of a kind of a grayish brown black. He's dark, and he's decidedly male, and he's standing between a couple of trees, and they kind of as they come out of the ground, they kind of go in opposite directions. So he's got a big wide area between them, and he's kind of got his feet wedged up there, just off the ground on the edge of those trees, on the where they kind of took the bend. And he got one of his feet up there, and he's got his arms on each one of them, and he's kind of just looking at me. And I stepped on out as he's looking at me because he's just looking at me, and he's I don't detect there's anything. I kind of looked both directions, and when I first spotted him, I looked around behind me and everything, and I stepped on out, and because I had to, because that's the way I was going to have to go,
mm-hmm.
and to get my car. That or I was going to have to retract chase the whole thing, and I didn't want to do that and be on the other side of that berm and have him know where I was. I wanted to, beat a foot out of there.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of stood there. And because he's looking at me, and I'm kind of looking at him, and the fear and dread kind of a deal that you're going to get a whooping kind of just lifted, and he's just standing there looking at me, and I can see another one. And there's what's left of a little tiny bit of a berm, maybe about 4 foot tall. Might have been more for the flood, I don't know. But on the other side of it, now the river made a bend right there, so they got the river behind them. Now the other one, there's one that's more decidedly brown, and these don't have a crest on their head, and they're skinnier. They're big, more like this one that I'm looking at is like an athlete, and
they're not built like a barrel though. They got more of a humanish type build.
This sucker is 3.5 foot wide and probably has a 40-inch waist. So, I mean, this guy's built
bodybuilder type. Yeah.
You ain't a wolfing, yeah. He looked like my buddy that was a college quarterback for a football team, only bigger. And
wow.
Looked like Conan the Barbarian build. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Did
so,
you see his face very well?
yeah, I did.
Did his face look human?
It was so dark. All I can tell you is where there was hair.
Right. Okay.
Okay. It was dark. Now he wasn't in the shade, but his face was dark.
Right.
And it had hair on it. It had hair on it. He looked a lot like, his face looked a lot like, if you took the Caesar, the ape from Planet of the Apes, that star ape,
right,
and you made his face a little rounder,
the chimpanzee-looking one,
yeah, and a little flatter,
mm-hmm.
he looked like that.
So sounds like you saw probably a type 2 there then.
Yeah, I would think so. And the other one looked like him, but never got up off the hands and knees. And I think they were digging for crawdads. The water receded, had been up for so long that anywhere there was something that didn't have grass on it, there were crawdad holes. There were crawdads everywhere. And
probably.
Yeah, and I think that they'd come out there and they were looking and they were digging for crawdads, because the one it had its head down when I walked up. It looked over at me, kind of shocked, and then looked back down, and it moved its arms, and then it looked back up at me, and that happened like 5 or 6 times. So what I'm thinking is it pulled a bunch of crawdads out of their holes and had them loose running around there or something. I don't know. And they were trying to get away. You know, it looked like it was preoccupied, but kept trying to look at me.
Yeah.
It was brown, and it looked. I didn't see any breast because it was on its hands and knees. But if the ground was the same height as it was on my side, it was about 4 foot tall on its hands and knees.
Mm-hmm.
The one that was looking at me, I would say, was about a little over 7 foot tall, maybe close to 8 foot.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, between 7 and 8 foot. So I'm thinking that one was probably close to that height. Huh?
Yeah, I was going to say that too. If it's 4 foot tall on its hands and knees, it's probably closer to 8 or even bigger standing up.
Well, I got to the impression that it was the female that went with this male.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we looked at each other for 20 seconds or so. Just looked. I'm kind of going from him to her, and or it, whatever the other one was, and and I'm kind of going. I'm finally, I got a good look, and it did something to where I could see its teeth, and the feeling came back, like you're about to get a whooping, and wasn't as strong as I felt in Oklahoma on that pond, but I knew that the time for us to look at each other was over. It had started swaying back and forth after about the first 10 seconds.
Were they making any kind of sounds at all that you could actually audibly hear?
No. Nope.
Interesting.
But it came to a point where I thought, well, I got to go, and so I turned on my heel and the ball of my other foot, and I just spun out of there a real quick walk, and I got to my rental car and I got the heck out of Dodge. Yeah,
wisely so. It sounds like.
So those were my 3 sides. Have I seen some since then? Yeah, I've seen some since then, but they were not that I had any kind of. These were the ones that I, when I lived in Florida. After we'd been in the development business out there, my business, the guy I was in business with, he had a bunch of houses he bought at Reunion Resort just 6 miles south of Disney. He got stuck with the last one. I moved. I'd busted up some of my knees at that point. This was in 2009. I'd been working in and out of there since 2003, and we were in the development business when things went south, and I busted up my knees, and I was having a hard time making ends meet, and here's a brand new house sitting out there. So, he said, come on out and stay in this place because I'm making payments on it, and I don't know how long I'm going to do that, but, So I moved on out there. It was a house we got stuck with, the business. And so you know, we're 6 miles south of Disney, but it was wild country. I mean, we're right next to the interstate, but I'm telling you, the other direction, it was a half mile, and you're in the edge of the big green swamp.
Yeah.
And the back way coming into there was a toll road that took off from the interstate. The first exit you could take, and you come back and you enter into Reunion. And coming through that golf course, it was wild on one side, and I've seen panthers. I mean, like a cougar, in the middle of the street. I've seen deer. I've seen that's why they were there. I've seen deer and cranes and wild turkeys, whole flocks of wild turkeys, eating there on the edge of the golf course. And early in the morning and dusk, and a booger. Saw a Bigfoot right inside the tree line. Looked like he was about to trying to figure out how he could slip out there on the golf course and nab one of these things. I don't remember whether it was deer or turkey, but he was in hunting mode. It looked like he was just kind of standing there as I go by, and I'm just kind of, you know, as I look over and I look him right in the eye, and I just keep on going. You know, I'm doing 30 miles an hour. I sure enough wasn't gonna stop. No. And I sure enough started locking my doors at night. You know,
they're down there. I lived over on the other side.
That's 2.5 blocks from my house. Yeah, that's 2.5 blocks from my house, man.
Yeah.
You know, and so what was really wild about it is the summer of 2010, from April to October, we got 150 inches of rain. And I mean, it was just miserable. I never went outside all summer. And the squalls would come in off the Atlantic, and we were about 50 miles from the maybe a little further, maybe 60 from the. Take you longer than that to drive it, but I'm talking about straight distance because clouds don't follow roads. From the Atlantic, and they would come in off of there and off the Atlantic, 30 to 60 feet off the deck, and these things would have, you know, big old tops on them, and they would come through there, and I'm telling you that the lightning and the thunder it's so intense that, you know, I grew up in tornado country. I was looking to go in the hall closet. I mean, I was scared to death. These things would hit, and they'd hit. I don't know. I didn't see the inside of the house light up, but I'm sure it hit inside the house. I thought the windows were going to break. The lightning and the thunder were so bad. I had a big long kitchen table, dining room table, on a Mexican tile floor, and it would move my table every once in a while.
Wow.
That's how bad the thunder and lightning was.
Yeah, that's some pretty serious concussive force going on there. It's shaking stuff like that around.
I'm telling you that if there had been somewhere to hide, I'd have done it. Occasionally, a couple times, I went into the bathroom that was under the stairs that went upstairs. I went into that bathroom and shut the door. I just go in there and hang out for a while.
A bit safer.
So, you know, because I'm telling you, just freaky. Now, here's the funny part. I got 96-inch tall, triple sliding glass doors, and then you go over 2 feet, and then there's double sliding glass doors. So the whole back of this thing, 96 inches tall, on the bottom and the top floor are glass, and they open up onto the patio in the pool. And the guy didn't do a really good job. During the summer, I got little lizards and little tiny frogs, little tiny lizards, little tiny frogs coming in between the slots on those things. So, I mean, literally, I can hear what's going on outside. Yeah. And I didn't have curtains for them. Now, it dropped off. I had a pool, and then it dropped off, and then it was the Jack Nicklaus course that went through there. And so I wasn't paying for this, so you know what I'm saying? I wouldn't have paid the kind of money that my friend did on this investment deal. But I was living there, so I wouldn't pay anything except for the utilities, and that was more than my regular rent. But here I sit. I never bothered to put curtains up in the place because I priced them as like $5,000. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Things are not cheap in Florida. Well, I probably wasn't that high, but it was more than I was going. I think it's $2,700 now. I think about it. You know, to do that upstairs and downstairs. Forget that noise. And so maybe it was that much for both of them, $5,000. Anyway, so I just left it open. I didn't. I got me some of those paper ones that just like a big Post-it, the accordion type for the upstairs. I just left the downstairs open. And so, no curtains. So anyway, when these storms would go through, occasionally you could hear screaming, roaring from the swamp area. And Bear and I have discussed this, chatting on Facebook, that it's common in the South. I'm telling you that when the times would come when we get that bad thunder and lightning, 15, 20 minutes later, you would hear it, the most ungodly screaming and yelling coming from that swamp area. And because the only place they had to hide was a tree, and that's not where you want to hide in a lightning storm.
No.
And I'm hearing the boogers over there getting lit up.
Man, oh man, I bet if that was going on all the time, it was really wearing on them too. They must have been some crazy.